I want to thank Chief Warner for being here today. This is a day that we have a lot of memories that are coming forward. And I've told this story before that I was in the World Trade Center buildings 2 weeks before the attacks, spent many, adding up to days and weeks there, and I lost loved ones. So this is a day of memory. But as Chief Warner said, there was a September 12th. I bet each one of you can think of a woman that has had an impact on your life. Now, I could say my wife, my daughter, my mother, and those would be correct. I think you might say someone similar. But I'm going to tell you a short story about someone that had an impact on my life that you probably don't recognize the name. Her name was Ava Kor. She had a remarkable story. Ava and her family were arrested and taken to Auschwitz when she was 10 years old. She had a twin sister named Miriam. And this is a picture from the archives with both the sisters. Now, the Nazis, it can best be described as a morbid fascination. They had a morbid fascination, the medical doctors at Auschwitz, on twins. So immediately, Miriam and Ava were separated from their parents, and they never saw their parents again. And they were spared because they were twins. They were subjected to what can be only described as horrific experiments by the hands of someone whose nickname was the Angel of Death. His name was Joseph Mengele. They were held in rooms that were unspeakable and injected with experimental drugs. One comment that the doctor made was he was showing how upset he was because his two specimens after an injection, the two specimens were Ava and Miriam, they would not live more than 2 weeks because of that. But Ava knew that if she died, they would euthanize her sister and vice versa, so they fought. And they survived that. And 9 months later, they were freed. You know, Miriam had a lot of health issues afterwards. And Ava struggled with anger, resentment, frustration because of how she was treated and what they did. She was trying to find forgiveness. And so she did the unthinkable. She actually journeyed and found a former Nazi medical doctor that was there at Auschwitz and visited with them, and they both went to Auschwitz together. After that trip, she wrote a letter to that doctor. It only said 3 words. It said, "I forgive you." She realized the power of forgiveness and was even able to forgive Mengele as well. She talked about and described the situation as a great weight being lifted off of herself when she was able to forgive. One of her most famous quotes was, "I want my time on this earth to count for something." You know, Ava's time on this earth did matter. It did count. She left a wonderful legacy, and her story of forgiveness is one that touches my heart. It's a powerful, powerful statement of forgiveness. You know, as we open the Bible and start looking at the continuation of our series on Elisha, we're going to meet another remarkable woman that I believe will leave an impact on each one of you. I'd say she represents one of the best examples of radical faith in the entire Bible. Our story begins in 2 Kings 4, starting with verse 8. One day Elisha went to Shunem, and a well-to-do woman was there and urged him to stay for a meal. So whenever he came by, he stopped there to eat. She said to her husband, "I know that this man who often comes our way is a holy man of God. Let's make a small room on the roof and put in it a bed and a table, a chair and a lamp for him. Then he can stay there wherever he comes to us." You know, the first thing you might notice about the woman are the things that aren't actually said about her. You know, she isn't listed as a leader. She's not a Miriam, an Esther, or a Deborah. And another thing, she doesn't yet, as we will see, have a child. So she's not a Sarah, a Rebecca, or a Hannah. You know what? We don't even know her name. But with the verses we just read, there's a few qualities that come forward. You know, in the NIV, as we read, it describes her as well-to-do. In the New King James Version, notable is the word that's used, and prominent is used in the NASB. So imagine for a moment, you're Elisha, you're the traveling preacher, prophet, teacher. You're going from city to city, and one day you go by Shunem, and you meet them, and you have a wonderful meal together. So now, each time you're going from city to city, you're thinking to yourself, hey, maybe I should stop by and swing by Shunem. She was much more than a good cook. Regardless of her cooking skills, what was more important is she had the gift of hospitality. She wanted Elisha to feel comfortable and actually converted her house into a free bed and breakfast. She made Elisha feel at home. You know, the Bible is very clear about how important hospitality is. In Romans 12:13, share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Hebrews 13:2, do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. I think each one of us have had experiences like that where there was a moment of hospitality. It doesn't even need to be a big thing, but it makes a lasting impact. You know, I can tell a few stories. You know, my first international trip after 9/11, which was very difficult, was a trip that I did to Nice, France. I'd actually been there a few times, and you know, Nice is a beautiful city on the Mediterranean, but as we were struggling with the emotions and feelings of 9/11, my colleagues and friends wanted to go out for an intimate dinner. And so we went to a restaurant, but I can hardly describe it as a restaurant because there was just 2 or 3 tables. It was more like a personal home. And I had ordered some pasta. And I searched on the internet because I didn't take a picture of this, but when the pasta came in, it was beautiful, but there was a opened quail egg, and there was raw yolk in it, that before I had a chance, the waiter poured it over my pasta. Now, I didn't say anything, but you know, looks must have told a big story there because my eyes must have been as big as saucers, because I normally wouldn't do that on my pasta. But my friends, colleagues, didn't say a word, didn't embarrass anyone, but someone had ordered the exact same dish, and before they had the chance to pour that quail egg, he swapped plates with me. You know, that happened almost 20 years ago, but I still remember it vividly. It wasn't a big thing, but it was a simple act of hospitality. A few years ago, I was in China, and you've probably seen those big lazy Susans, lots of dishes that are put on. I think we've got a picture coming up of that. And this is one of my first trips to China, and I'll never forget this. You know, there are some interesting things that I saw. It's hard to even describe this, but imagine, you know, goose heads, and they would reach in and pull the tongue out as a delicacy. I will tell you, that just spun by the lazy Susan when it came in front of me. But what was amazing to me, and again, there was even a language boundary here, that I like bok choy, I was eating some of these other things, and someone, as that lazy Susan would spin the dishes by, someone would stop, back it up, just for me. There's tremendous importance to the gift of practicing hospitality to others. I've seen so many cultures out there where hospitality was something they figured out very well. As we continue, we see this is a natural gift of the woman of Shunem. So continue on with verse 11. One day, when Elisha came, he went up to his room and lay down there. He said to his servant Gehazi, call the Shunammite. And so he called her, and she stood before him. Elisha said to him, tell her, you have gone to all this trouble for us. Now what can be done for you? Can we speak on your behalf to the king or the commander of the army? She replied, I have a home among my own people. What? What did she say? Is that the response that you'd expect? I dwell among my own people. Through her response, we see a second characteristic of the Shunammite woman. She is content. What is she saying? She's saying, hey, Elisha, I appreciate your offer, but I have a home. My needs are met. I don't need anything. You know, we live in a society that is almost the polar opposite of that, don't we? Have you ever heard of the term quid pro quo? The definition is a favor or advantage granted or expected in return for something. In other words, you scratch my back, and I'll scratch yours. We live in a society that everyone wants more. There's strings attached to everything, and the question everyone asks is, what's in it for me? We want new house, new car, bigger, better, faster. But she turns down the offer from Elisha. She was not acting out of any selfish motivation. You know, her behavior is the opposite of even examples we see in the Bible. Can you think of incidents where there was a lack of contentment? Well, the children of Israel, that's a classic example. You know the story, right? They're saved from Egypt. Oh, it's better if we were to go back to Egypt. Better to die in the desert. We have no water. God gives them water. Oh, we have no food. God sends manna. Oh, we are sick of this manna. God sends quails. My stomach hurts because I ate too many quail. It goes on and on and on. So the question, this is a really important question for us to understand right here, right now, is what is the secret of being content? And I think it comes down to this one word right here. It's perspective. A couple of examples to kind of illustrate this. Have you ever seen the cartoon? I think it's on the next slide here, where there are two pictures here. There's someone on an island, and he sees a boat in the distance, and he's like, yeah, hooray, I'm saved, there's a boat. The next frame, there's a boat, a small, little, tiny boat coming forward, and he's like, yeah, land, I'm saved. Both perspectives are actually wrong. But maybe one that I'm trying to get the point to is this one. There's a picture here where there's two little bugs looking at a beautiful sunset. Well, the next frame of the picture zooms out, and they're actually just sitting on a book looking at a tennis ball. You know, sometimes we're like those bugs, aren't we? Not seeing the full picture. Perspective helps us understand that there's more to your story and more to my story than what's happening right here and right now. And the simple fact is that God has a plan for you that involves eternity. The New Testament speaks of the importance of being content. Philippians 4:11, I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. So how do we be content like the woman of Shunammite or like Paul? You know, Paul, wow. Dire situations, he was beaten, he was chained, he was jailed, he was ultimately beheaded. But imagine him being jailed and writing those words. Not only is Paul content, but he's going to start singing and he's going to convert the jailer. Having a perspective helps you understand it is not what you don't have that matters, but being thankful for what you do have. You know, I've learned a lot from my wife. I remember, actually, let me show this picture right here. Do you recognize what this picture is? This is actually a very old washing machine. You remember that? 2 bins, a wringer. Yeah, imagine the amount of work it would take to do a thing of laundry. And I remember going up to visit with my wife up to her grandfather's house in Arkansas, and they had no dishwasher. Imagine every meal we had to actually wash all the dishes. So my wife is always saying, being thankful for the little things really, truly matter. The response that we see from the Shunammite woman shows that she was content. And we see that God gives her the gift of a son. But the woman became pregnant, and the next year, about the same time, she gave birth to a son, just as Elisha had told her. The child grew, and one day he went out to his father, who was with the reapers. He said to his father, my head, my head. His father told the servant, carry him to his mother. So between verses 17 and 18, there's actually a few years that go by. We go from pregnancy to the child that's old enough to be with his father in the fields. So when the boy comes out with his father, he gets sick or something happens. When he gets sick, what happens? Well, sorry to us dads out there, but when one of your kids are sick, who do they want? They want their mom. After the servants had lifted him up and carried him to his mother, the boy sat on her lap until noon, and then he died. She went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, then shut the door and went out. It would be heartbreaking to hold your loved one on their lap until they die. Can you imagine? Actually, there's many of us that don't need to imagine this whatsoever. Some of us have gone through that ourselves. You know, this morning I got to church early, and there was a message waiting for me that someone lost their son of 42. We all know the pain of tragedy. But did you notice what the woman does when her son dies? Does she scream? Does she blame God? Does she call for his body to be taken away? No. She lays the boy's body on the prophet Elisha's bed, the bed of the one that promised her. We're now going to see another important trait of the woman of Shunem. We're going to see that she is confident. Her contentment allows her to show confidence. And now we're getting to the part of the story that simply blows my mind. We will see one of the purest examples of faith in the Bible. She is confident, and that confidence ties to her faith. She doesn't know how things are going to play out, but she has faith. Her confidence shows through her actions. You know, I know it is hard to see when we're dealing with the heartaches of grief, but God will always find a way to help us through our tragedies. She called to her husband and said, "Please send me one of the servants and a donkey so I can go to the man of God quickly and return." "Why go to him today?" he asked. "It's not the new moon or the Sabbath." So we got to stop for a moment. Does the father seem clueless? Notice that the woman doesn't even tell her husband about their son. That would have been my first question if I was the father. But we can see the woman of Shunem is on a mission. She is very focused, and she is going to do something. And how does she answer her husband? It's my mind blown. Says, "That's all right." That's another way of saying, "It's okay. All will be well." What kind of response is this? Well, she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, "Lead on. Don't slow down for me unless I tell you." So she set out and came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. And when he saw her in the distance, the man of God said to the servant Gehazi, "Look, there's the Shunammite. Run and meet her and ask her, 'Are you all right? Is your husband all right? Is your child all right?'" And what does she say? Everything is all right. Elisha sees her coming, sends his servant out there to see if everything's okay, and her response is, "It is well." When we lose someone, how hard is it to say, "It is well"? It is not well. I lost my son. I feel hopeless. I feel angry. I feel like my heart has been ripped out of my body. How can she say this? She says it twice. Once to her husband and once to the servant. Well, she had confidence in Elisha and God, and that led to faith in God through God's servant Elisha. Now look how this conversation goes. She says, "Did I ask you for a son, my Lord? Didn't I tell you don't raise my hopes?" Well, you remember, she never asked for a child. She never asked for the situation to come. Don't play with my emotions. She was offered anything by Elisha, and she chose nothing. If we go back 10 verses to verse 16, this is when the promise came. Her first response is, "No, my Lord," she objected. "Please, man of God, don't mislead your servant." So here she is with Elisha. She is raw, deeply saddened, but steadfastly clings to the one that gave her the promise. My friends, we need to steadfastly cling to the one that gave us our promises. Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep in him." Well, it continues. Elisha said to Gehazi, "Tuck your cloak into your belt, take my staff in your hand, and run. Don't greet anyone you meet, and if anyone greets you, do not answer. Lay my staff on the boy's face." But the child's mother said, "As surely as the Lord lives, and as you live, I will not leave you." So he got up and followed her. Now we see another characteristic of the woman of Shunem. She is persistent. She wasn't going to go back and leave until Elisha would come with her. Do you know someone that is dealing with tragedy? It is tough. Have you heard the story where they're dealing with tragedy? They go to God, they pray and feel like nothing's happening. Then what happens? Anger sets in, blame. Listen, my friends, know that God hears and answers our prayers, but sometimes we don't understand the answer and sometimes we don't like the answer. But that does not mean that God isn't hearing you. He isn't punishing you. He's not against you, and he hasn't stopped loving or caring for you. God's will for a greater purpose can be hard for us to see or understand without, here comes that word, the right perspective. So what is our role as fellow Christians as we're dealing with tragedies? We saw wonderful examples that started September 12th of 2001. Well, last week we had the privilege of having Cherie Peters here at the church. You've probably seen her program on 3ABN. And she had a powerful testimony, how God brought her through a lot of different things. And we are very privileged, starting on September 21, we're going to have a 14-week celebrating life and recovery. Every Tuesday, 7 o'clock, you can join via Zoom, join here in person. But it really hit me. In fact, the words I've been thinking about all week, she said one thing that really resonated with me. She said that in order for someone to heal, they must feel safe. And that, my friends, is our collective calling, is to befriend and support those that are hurting. If we are hurting, and all of us are, at some level, we must have the attitude like this woman of Shunem. God, I will not leave you regardless of how this turns out. The woman wasn't going to give up on Elisha or God no matter what. Neither should we. I'd like to share, there's a short video. You may have seen this before, but here's the story of Horatio Spafford.
When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my love thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. Though Satan should buffet, though trials should come, let this blessed assurance come true, that Christ has regarded my helpless
How could Horatio write those words while dealing with such tragedy? He had confidence and he had faith in God. When you listen to those words of that beloved hymn, you see Horatio had the right perspective. We know how the story of the woman of Shunammite and her son ends. Gehazi went on ahead and laid the staff on the boy's face, and there was no sound or response. So Gehazi went back to meet Elisha and told him, "The boy has not awakened." When Elisha reached the house, there was the boy lying dead on the couch. He went in, shut the door on the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. Then he got on the bed, lay on the boy, mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes, hands to hand. As he stretched himself out on him, the boy's body grew warm. Elisha turned away and walked back and forth in the room, and then got on the bed and stretched out on him once more. The boy sneezed 7 times, opened his eyes. Elisha summoned Gehazi and said, "Call the Shunammite." And he did. When she came, he said, "Take your son." She came in, fell at the feet, and bowed to the ground. Then she took her son and went out. We see that what Gehazi did didn't work. Elisha comes in, leaves them outside the room. Elisha puts his body on the body of the boy, which is exactly the same thing his predecessor Elijah did when he was with the widow of Zarephath. Warmth comes back to the boy, gets up, and Elisha calls for his mother. But did you notice that the woman did something different that others might not do? Our reaction might be to run directly to the boy, but she expresses gratitude. She fell down on Elisha's feet first, she expresses gratitude, and then she takes up her boy. The story of the woman of Shunem is a wonderful example of faith for us. We see and heard about hospitality, being content, confident, persistent, grateful, and having the right perspective. It has been a difficult time these last few months. We have people here that are hurting, people that are sick, people have had the loss of loved ones. You know, we had 2 memorials on the same day a couple of weeks ago, and I think we've got at least 4 planned in the upcoming weeks. But this story gives us a recipe. It is a recipe on how to weather these storms. No matter how devastating our struggles, disappointments, and troubles are, they are only temporary. No matter what happens to you, no matter the depth of the tragedy, pain you face, no matter how death is knocking at your door or your loved one's door, there is a promise to you of a future of immeasurable happiness. That is the radical faith of the woman of Shunem.
When peace like a river
flows like sea, billows roll. Whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. My sin, know the joy of this glorious thought. My sin, not in part, but the whole, is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. And Lord, haste the day when my faith shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back as a scroll. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul.
Amen. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the messages we can learn from this remarkable woman of Shunem. My prayer is that we steadfastly cling to you in each step of our journey, and that through you we can say, it is well. We love you, Lord. Amen.